Humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. It is either a climate solidarity pact or a collective suicide pact.
We reuse the acids so that we don't let it go. Yeah, we don't discharge it into the environment.
Welcome yet again to another edition of the Green Economy. I'm Ivan Tibenkana, and obviously this is Smart 24 TV, channel 372 on DSTV, and obviously channel 394 on Go TV. The Green Economy is obviously the program that brings you the latest issues and matters regarding climate change, mitigation, adaptation measure, then the human activity. So obviously every week we come through with a discussion on a couple of issues. So this time around, and obviously it's quite cloudy, but that doesn't take away the fact that we have to keep on moving. Towards the end of this very month, we had the climate summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, COP27. And this was the 50th conference of the parties on the African continent. We had one in Marrakech, in fact two in Marrakech, one in Durban, and then the other that's happened in Nairobi. So this was obviously called the African COP. A couple of issues were looked into, from the Non-Proliferation Treaty for fossil fuels, and then when you look at the climate financing, the loss and damage initiative for the least developed countries, the most ravaged countries when it comes to climate change. So a couple of issues were looked into. But getting into that, in Uganda here, we are looking at industrialization, rapid industrial growth, which has been Uganda's initiative for some time, getting into 2022. There is something called the Green Manufacturing Strategy, a 5-year master plan that was initiated in 2020, supported by the United Nations Development Program and then the United Nations Environment Program. So we are looking into one of the initiatives that the industry, the manufacturing industry, can take on to create green investments, limiting the impacts of emissions, carbon emissions. Obviously, the carbon footprint for the manufacturing industry is quite questionable, especially when it comes to tracking it down. So currently, the Green Manufacturing Strategy is one of the initiatives. And obviously, we are looking at the transition from the ADL, agricultural development-led industrialization, right into the fourth industrial revolution that looks into different modes of industrialization, from the automobile to a lot of many other things. So these are some of the issues that the government of Uganda, Africa at large, are looking at to limit carbon emissions and then the greenhouse gases, so that we can contain ourselves within the pre-industrial level projections. That's the 1.5 degrees centigrade. Most people call it the tipping point. How it gets to that, it's a matter of understanding how the damage we've created onto the ecosystem is. So in this program, we shall start with some of the key highlights. Antonio Guterres, who is the Secretary General for the United Nations, decided to call this a catastrophe. We are heading towards climate hell. So it's either a climate pact or a suicide pact. So we're going to take a look into what exactly happened at the UN, at the climate summit, basically. Antonio Guterres with his statements. And then we had our very own, that's Leah Namugera, who said Uganda and then the country at large, the world at large, needs to look into matters where the big polluters need to be accountable. And obviously in Uganda here we have some of the biggest polluters. When you look at the biggest industries, much as it isn't to the very extent of the developed countries, but the pollution is there. So in Uganda, where are our biggest contributors towards the carbon footprint? We shall have to be looking into that. And then the measures that some of these players have taken to mitigate all the damage. So first, we'll take a look at what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh, and then the statements, Leah Namugera, and then our very own. We have one of the members of the African Union for Conservationists, that's Professor Raymond Katebaka. He had a statement earlier on, even before the COP27. So all this in this first episode, rather the first moments of the show. And then we come back later on, we shall be looking into matters more in this program.
Greenhouse gas emissions keep growing, global temperatures keep rising, and our planet is fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator. The war in Ukraine, other conflicts have caused so much bloodshed and violence and had dramatic impacts all over the world. But we cannot accept that our attention is not focused on climate change. We must, of course, work together to support peace efforts and end the tremendous suffering. But climate change is on a different timeline and a different scale. It is a defining issue of our age. It is the central challenge of our century. It is unacceptable, outrageous, and self-defeating to put it on the back burner.
I don't see justice when big polluters are untouchable. Is it justice for the world leaders to choose profits over lives? COP27 has been nicknamed the African COP. If COP27 is to truly deliver, we must face some real truth. Some truth that will face decades of inaction from world leaders. Some truth that the world is in a state of emergency because of fossil fuels. Some truth that Africa contributes less than 4% of the carbon emissions, but we suffer the most. The future is at stake, mostly young children. We're not sure whether we are heard when we speak or we're just ignored. But let the African COP be a different COP. Let the African COP listen to the biggest stakeholders. Let the African COP be an action COP.
What is our common future? Are they oceans or seas? Are they lakes? Are they wetlands? What are they? What is our common future? This is the question that was framed some time back. Now you have Paris Declaration. How many countries that have succeeded with the Paris Declaration? You have New York Declaration, where Uganda committed itself to plant about, I think, 11 million trees. That was in 2015. Have they planted them? How are we progressing with that? What is our common future? As a country, as a region, Africa, as the whole world. Now, the problem is this. Tying money on all the activities and receives this money when they put these activities. When they receive these monies or finances, what is the success story that does exist of who has done what with these monies?
All right, welcome back from that. So besides Sharm el-Sheikh, among other issues, there is something going on. And then when you look at the ongoing issues globally, we have the 2022 FIFA World Cup. And this has a message practically embedded to address climate change. So when Qatar was awarded to host the World Cup back in 2010, there were aspirations. And obviously, one of the catchy elements has been its carbon neutrality move. So the FIFA World Cup to transpire with limited emissions from, let's say, the transport, from the manufacturing as they were constructing the different stadiums. 8 stadiums, 7 of them constructed and then 1 renovated. So all that comes with elements of usage of fuel, electricity, among other issues. So with carbon neutrality, there's been a contest from the carbon market world that estimates that over 5 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents will be emitted. And then obviously the report from FIFA indicated 3.6, if I'm not mistaken, metric tons of carbon dioxide. So let's have a look at what's going on in Qatar. From the armband messages, when you look at Lionel Messi, Kalidou Koulibaly, and then among other players that captain the different teams, from the blue armbands that puts up the message for unity, right into the Save the Planet message on the different armbands that they wear, a critical message. So football looks like it's setting a precedent for the future World Cups that will be hosted, and Qatar is writing onto this one. So let's have a look at this and then understand how well the message is growing globally and what we intend to do in the future.
Towards Jeju, and it breaks free! And the opportunity.
The 2022 edition of the FIFA World Cup is being held in Qatar, part of the Arabian Peninsula, in one of the most oil-rich regions. Having won the bid to host back in 2010, Qatar took the initiative to set up the necessary infrastructure, from roads, a metro system, to the stadiums, 7 newly erected, adding to the legendary Khalifa to serve about 1.2 million visitors. However, all this comes amidst the heat of human rights violation, but more of concern is the country's pledge towards a carbon neutral tournament.
Here he goes again, 2 to look for!
FIFA's report in June 2021 on the World Cup's greenhouse gas impact estimated a release of 3.6 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, a figure that's being refuted by the Carbon Markets Watch and puts it at 5.0 metric tons. One of Qatar's major considerations for limited emissions in this tournament has been invested in electric mobility, a fleet of 700 electric buses and the standard metro system, 8-lane highways, and the decommissioning approach for establishments such as Stadium 974, alias Ras Abu Abud. Away from that, there's been a clear climate message: save the planet, embedded on the armbands of the team captains such as Argentina's Lionel Messi, Senegal's Kalidou Koulibaly, among others, as the oil-rich country joins the rest of the world to push for the 1.5 degrees centigrade temperature cap. The climate change precedent set in Doha shall be an interesting development for future mass inviting and capital-intensive tournaments as the globe surges with a call to address climate change and provide adaptations to the crisis.
Now that's the World Cup for us and Qatar altogether. Usually the message has always been on racism. So climate change came through this time around. So we'll be looking into the decommissioning agenda of, for instance, Stadium 974, among other issues. Electric mobility was incorporated, a metro system in that regard. So many things in there in the World Cup to take a look at. But away from that, in Uganda, like I intimated before, earlier on as the program kick-started, that we are looking at the shift into rapid industrialization. And just previously, the State Minister for Energy, that's David Bahati, said Uganda is looking into this on a broader scale. So, and then the carbon footprint, tracking it down is quite paramount. So all these shall be affected by the green manufacturing strategy, cutting from 2020 right into 2025, the 5-year master plan. So how that gets into a reality shall be quite interesting when you look at reliance on the green minerals and then the shift from fossil fuel reliance right into clean energy. It's a collective and then quite an investment that requires a lot of efforts. So first we're going to take a look into what the State Minister for Energy, the message he has for us, and then later on we shall be understanding very well how the green manufacturing strategy is going through, especially at a time when our reliance on industrial services is growing.
Contribution of 27.1% to GDP. This is the contribution of industry. If you aggregate what is being manufactured, the productivity of manufacturing towards our GDP is 27.1%. Services is there, agriculture is there, but for purposes of this function and this sector, what we contribute to our gross domestic value is 27.1%. And our strategy is to make sure that in the next 5 years, the industrial sector contributes 35% to our GDP, which I think is unachievable. As you have seen, His Excellency the President almost every week is launching a factory, which I think is a good thing for our country because these factories create wealth, but most importantly, they create jobs which are much needed.
A shift from the agro-industrial-led development to the broad, rapid industrialization has cast the needs of the growing manufacturing sector in the spotlight for sustainable production, especially with the green manufacturing strategy, a 5-year master plan springing from 2020 to 2025, and it intends to provide intentions for environmental and social-friendly practices that reduce the impact of industrial processes and product use while pursuing economic benefits through recycling, resource reduction, and the green design. With the growing manufacturing sector, small and medium-sized enterprises to the large-scale establishments, Uganda's pollution load is shared among the different sector players, with the cement, steel, brewing industries sharing the biggest emissions and burden.
Cement, then also steel, the steel industries, they are also big emitters of carbon dioxide. But then what those people have done in regards to climate change, they are doing what they call carbon trading, whereby they plant trees to at least cover up for the emissions. Yeah, they can probably partner with some community and they plant trees. In that way, they are trading their emitted carbon vis-a-vis the carbon that their trees are absorbing.
We are running out of the forest cover. We are running out of the wetland cover, right? Because we are not taking care of this, which is also enshrined within our laws. Yeah, the laws are clear. They are providing for the protection of forest cover. But we are not only losing the forest cover on the protected areas, but also on private land. But now, if, for example, we have well-formalized administrative systems within the areas that are supposed to be forest reserves, and there is no forest cover anymore, how are we going to account our contribution towards climate change, for example? So yes, we can talk about industrialization, but this is a double-edged sword. We are not only the agents of global warming or climate change, but also the victims.
However, the green design, capital intensiveness, technological transfer are among the key elements that only a few establishments have the luxury and power to implement, more so as the industry, largely like global economies and developing and underdeveloped countries, rely on fossil fuels.
Right now, of course, we are depending on the hydro, but there are quite diverse technologies that can help out boost the industrialization in terms of utilization of renewable energy. Besides hydro, we can talk about technologies like the CCUS, yes, that can help us reduce on the carbon dioxide footprint in that regard. Then we have a technology called biomass gasification. Biomass gasification is that you're doing waste to energy, whereby you get your waste, like we have a lot of waste that we are just disposing of in landfill. So that waste is converted to energy.
The National Environment Action Plan and the National Environment Management Policy are crucial frameworks whose implementation will grossly be relied on to realize the green manufacturing agenda as climate concerns stroll further.
Our ultimate goal is to put a stop to further pollution of our ecosystems from plastics. What we are debating are the routes to get there, and those can be many, and we shall continue engaging.
All right, the program still continues, and obviously this is Smart 24 TV. I'm Ivan Tibenkana. Green Economy is the name of the program. Still going on, in Uganda here we have an association that looks into impact assessment. So that's the Uganda Association for Impact Assessment, which subscribes to the International Association for Impact Assessment. And just recently, they had an AGM where they looked into their progress and a couple of other elements. So talking to a number of members in there, from the chairperson of the UAIA, and then a conservationist still, and an environmental practitioner called Mr. Rukundo, we had an insightful discussion on what exactly the Uganda's manufacturing industry intends to look into, and then the trajectory, the direction it's taking, from the shift from Jinja as an industrial area or region to Kampala, the capital, for the capital city serving as an industrial city. That shift is quite needy to understand. And then the implications of all that, the burden of the industry, and then how they are dealing with issues regarding waste management, then the need to recycle, among other elements. So first, we shall take a look at what the chairperson of the UAIA had to say, and then later on we shall look into Mr. Rukundo's concern in regard to climate change and then the management of the industrial sector still.
Large and by the manufacturing industry actually does the environment impact assessments, but I think where we have a challenge is the aspect of enforcement. So you find that most times they don't do the environment audits every year, but also you find that in fulfilling the conditions of approval is a little inadequate, most especially in terms of the waste management component and then the pollution aspect. You find that there are a lot of industries that actually emit particulate matter into the atmosphere. And then also in terms of restoration of the environment. So you find that some of these people actually do discharge into the fragile ecosystem or into the environment. So you find that, yes, we need to do a lot of enforcement together with the local communities and the National Environmental Management Authority. And the communities need to be their own police to ensure that compliance actually comes, because then the environment that is polluted is the environment within their communities.
The investment is quite critical. So investing into climate smart technology, technological transfer as compared to the developed countries is one of the biggest challenges. But then the initiative to understand the footprint is as well as imperative as production could be. So UAIF for us, and then as we head into the break, there's something special. There is research in Uganda, and obviously industrial research is spearheaded by the Uganda Industrial Research Institution. So later on we shall be understanding how well they've managed to push elements such as upcycling, then recycling, and then the research itself, innovative research, incorporating it into production for the manufacturing industry to carry on. Like I said before, we are looking into the green manufacturing strategy. So how best can we limit the impact of manufacturing, the carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and then waste management, which is crucial, recycling, which is a provision to mitigate the burden, the waste burden that goes into the landfills and all that. So climate smart production, research is quite critical. When we come back later on after the break, we shall be understanding all that. And then there's something still interesting. One of the biggest players in the manufacturing industry has a climate smart initiative, a climate project. That's called the Forever Forestry. So we shall be looking into that and what it means for the community to offset the carbon burden. So first, the break. When we come back, all that together.